Could you explain what the UK Citizenship test is and why the government have introduced a new version?
The Life of the UK Citizenship test is a test which government introduced in 2005, and the idea is to integrate new migrants who are becoming citizens of the United Kingdom. The objective of the test is to test that they have an essential framework of knowledge and they'll be able to integrate into British society easily. There are also issues around the idea of community cohesion, and there are issues particularly about the threat of terrorism, and the idea here is that some kind of a test will in some ways give people the knowledge to feel attached to the United Kingdom, to feel British. And if they're feeling more British, then they might be less prepared to listen to more extremist ideologies.
In what ways does this new version differ from the previous one published by the last Labour government?
The new test has been described by the government ministers as something which focuses on values, the idea of British values, and what they call the heart of being British. So it's to inculcate a sense of patriotism. And one of the reasons they've argued is that the idea is to not teach people how to test for benefits and to learn how to use the National Health Service, but instead to actually give them a sense about how they can participate in British life, to be a good citizen volunteering in your community. In a way, it's a shift in emphasis from the last Labour government, and the reason why is that the Labour government focused on citizenship, on the idea that we were all in some ways tied to a civic community. And the current government actually says that no, it's more about the fact that we feel British. It's not the fact that you've just got a passport, it's the fact you feel part of a British national community. And so we've seen a big shift, and the shift is away from the idea that we have social rights, that we have the right to claim benefits off the government, particularly welfare benefits, and more about responsibilities. What is your responsibility to being British, to becoming part of being the British society?
And finally, does it tell us anything about how the coalition views Britishness?
The new report is fascinating, and in many ways it is valuable. It does provide some very interesting information. If you were coming to this country and you'd never been here before, you might be surprised at some of the strange nuances and practices and rituals that we have. But it does also suggest something about the idea of how the Conservative government particularly views the idea of being British. The report is deeply Anglo-centric. Much of it is about England rather than the rest of the United Kingdom, particularly the history section. And the history section itself is odd because it's a very Whiggish version of the past. It focuses on kings and queens rather than on ordinary people. It doesn't say much about us, the British people. It says actually a lot about the elites in power. And indeed, one commentator from the Migrants Workshop Network said it was like an examination entry for elite politics. And I think in some ways it's true that it presents a very limited view of British society. The problem is with any of these booklets, that they are a snapshot and they will always have a political viewpoint to it. And in that sense, it merely reflects the current government's view of what it is to be British. Come 2015, we might get a Labour government, they might change it again. But the interesting point behind all this is that no one ever asked the question, does this test work? Beyond actually getting the passport and becoming a British citizen, does it actually inculcate a real sense of British national identity? And there is no evidence to suggest it does. Indeed, it's a little like the debates about history teaching in schools. Many of the Conservatives are saying we need to go back to a traditional view of the past, a past which is very much founded on British successes in society. The problem is, research at the University of Huddersfield has shown actually that history teaching doesn't change young people's attitudes and identities that much. And indeed, it's interesting that this booklet has come out at a time when really there aren't that many questions about being British. Last year, the Olympics suggested the idea that we're all tied to a multicultural version of Britishness. We all are rather easy with ourselves. And indeed, research here at the University of Huddersfield is looking at that issue of Britishness. In July of this year, we're holding a conference which looks at the politics of history teaching. And we're going to be looking at history teaching in the four nations of the United Kingdom to see whether actually there is a common British theme. And during the year, we've got various events looking at the future of England. At the end of February, we've got a debate about the governance of England. And on St George's Day, we're having a colloquium which actually looks at British culture and identity and how England fits in with the future of the Union.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.